Hi, my name is Oscar and I'm a scientist. Today I have a special video for you about USCIS news. There was a conversation about two USCIS leaders that I want to talk about today, and you will see that there are good news in that conversation. One is reduced processing times that we will all welcome, but also not so good news such as the possible potential increase in USCIS fees very soon. Let's jump into it. So in this rare October Fireside chat, we had two very important people, or Jadu, the director of USCIS, and on the other hand, Phyllis Coven, who is the CIS Ombudsman, had a conversation about the current situation in USCIS and also the current practices and what they expect about this new fiscal year. Remember that the fiscal year started in October and it will run for a full year, so it will finish at the end of September 2023. So this was about 1 hour discussion on many topics that I thought they were very interesting, and I curated a list of 5 different clips that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to also show you a slide or two for each of those blocks so we can recap on the important points that especially affect the EB2 NIW category of green cards. You can, of course, take a look at the full conversation, and you can see that in the USCIS channel, but I'll leave a link in the description below because for some reason that video is hidden by USCIS. You can access if you have the link that I will provide, but as of yesterday, it was not visible in the USCIS channel if you just go there and open it. So let's watch the first of this list, and the list covers a range of challenges and important news. And I think there are very promising news, for example, reduction on backlogs, but then other things that are not so positive, like the increase on fees for the customers. Let's start with number one, USCIS current main challenges.
What are some of the immediate challenges that you encountered that you didn't expect, and how is your team approaching those?
So I really, that's a really good question. I walked in at a time when we were still experiencing COVID at a pretty decently high rate. Things have improved, and that's very good news. I walked in at a time that the agency is experiencing, continues to experience, and at the time it still was, one of the highest backlogs this agency has ever had. I also walked in about a year and some just after financial crisis of the agency that caused a hiring freeze, so attrition was not replaced. So a pretty difficult time, and I have to say that to this day, despite the financial crisis being behind us, I still feel the reverberating effects of that crisis. I feel it in the morale of our workforce, and we are constantly looking for ways to assure people that we are on the right foot and we are headed in the right direction. So those are some of the challenges that I walked into, and but certainly that is our focus. The big challenges are are at the top of our priorities now, and so we're looking at ways to ensure our fiscal management and ensure that we are not just solvent but strong, so that not only could we continue processing and do better at that, but also let our workforce know that everything's going to be okay at the agency, and this is not a place you want to leave. Also just trying to figure out how to replace all that attrition is so important, top of mind. Looking at ways to make decisions on processes and to ensure that they are focused and consider efficiency, so that we can try to get ahead of this backlog. It is enormous. It is a challenge. It has caused incredible spiked processing times that I know everybody is experiencing. But we have a lot of ideas and a lot of solutions, many of them that are already being put into place today.
So as you saw in that clip, the director of USCIS mentioned how backlogs have been the highest in the agency's history. She took over office a little bit over a year ago, and she found a very negative situation, a lot of people waiting for very extended periods of times, and she recognized the suffering of the people waiting and their families as well. This impacts a lot of people. And she mentioned how one of the issues that is causing or was causing these long lines were the effects of a previous hiring freeze that was in place, that it has now been lifted, and now the focus of the agency is hire more employees, motivate the current agency workers, and of course increasing the efficiency in a variety of processes. Let's take a look at the second clip, in which both the director of USCIS and the Ombudsman recognize that huge problem of the backlog that is a snowball effect in the agency.
Our focus has also been in trying to provide recommendations to you as to how to work on the agency's everyday work and its backlogs.
Yes.
That was the theme of our annual report in 2022. We called it the avalanche of backlogs. And what that was really about was that we came to recognize that the backlogs themselves had sort of a snowball impact.
Indeed.
That when people were waiting longer than they should to get their cards indicating their status, they still needed to work. They still needed to be able to verify their employment. They needed to travel. And those needs created for the agency sort of secondary workloads.
Absolutely.
Or collateral workloads, and so that the detriment of the backlogs is not only on the customers, but also on the agency.
Absolutely.
So our report this year, as I think you know, was about how to approach some of those most meaningful pain points,
Yep.
both for the customers and for the agency. And we did a study about issues associated with applying for advanced parole, which people need to do if they need to go overseas for an emergency or otherwise before their card has come out. We talked about the process for accessing expedite requests. We also sort of did a piece on thinking ahead to how to approach the affirmative asylum backlog, which has sort of taken a second step from crises on the border. And we hope that some of our recommendations, both in our annual report and those that we do very frequently informally with you, have helped. You mentioned some of them earlier in our discussion about extending the periods for employment authorization and just being creative in figuring out how we can help people get on with their lives and relieve some of the anxiety which is caused by the longer processing times.
That's right. That's right. Those are all very important challenges that have been highlighted, and I couldn't agree with you more that it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
So every delay means someone is calling our contact center, and therefore someone else has to wait longer. Every delay might result in litigation.
That's right.
And now we have our attorneys and our Office of Chief Counsel busy with litigation, instead of focused on perhaps looking at questions of policy and legality to make improvements. So now they're just focused on litigation. We have our offices overwhelmed across the country with requests to extend and emergency advance paroles to extend. We have people who are looking for emergency actions on their employment authorizations, which again, all of this, it's a snowball effect. You are so right that all of the pain that the individuals feel in us not being able to get to their cases in a timely and efficient manner ends up resulting in so many other parts of our agency as well being overwhelmed with resources that were never created for that. So, and I will say, as we just mentioned, the contact center, customer service, overwhelmed because of these reasons. And so in a certain sense, the answer in one answer, not all of it, one answer to customer service is bringing down that backlog.
That's right.
And ensuring that people are receiving answers to their requests in as timely a manner as possible. Of course, with all the integrity, the security as necessary, but ensuring that it is not, a year-long, 18-month, 2-year process. This has to be done in a timelier fashion.
Right.
On one hand, we have the Ombudsman talking about how her office helped USCIS, giving some recommendations and providing some information, so USCIS then takes action. She talked about advanced parole study, about how there's a need to process expedited requests in many cases, and how they need to extend the period for employment authorization, because that snowball effect causes what she called the avalanche of petitions and delays. So on the other hand, the director of the USCIS was talking about how this snowball effect is created. On one hand, longer lines of people waiting for USCIS decisions means that more people will call the USCIS contact centers, so there will be less time available for other users that may be calling for other reasons. The attorneys of the agency are also busy with litigation related to these long lines, and people are suing USCIS, so that takes a lot of resources out of the regular work. Then there are requests to extend advanced parole because people are just waiting and their advanced parole are running out and they need to travel. And finally, a very, very important point I think she was making is that USCIS, the agency, is the number one interested party in reducing the backlog. They really want to reduce these long lines so they can put everything back into control and on track to deliver the best outcomes for everyone. So let's now take a look at the specific clip talking about adjustment of status and how after the pandemic a lot of the family-based green cards were converted into employment-based green cards.
With regard to the employment-based adjustments, you're exactly right. That was something we were seeing so much of, and I like you said, I'm really happy to report that we were able to, together with the State Department, we're headed to being able to issue every single visa for this fiscal year. As you know, as a result of COVID and the fact that consulates have not gone to full opening as they were pre-COVID, a lot of the family-based visas, many of them, were not issued overseas for family-based petitioners, instead rolled over to this year in our employment-based system. And we at USCIS process most of the employment-based visa numbers as adjustment of status that we receive. And so we received way more than we have ever done. We have accomplished really more than double the work that we have ever done. And this was, of course, a result of all the things that we learned in the last fiscal year, where we were climbing out of COVID, climbing out of a financial crisis. And even then, we adjusted really a lot more than we have ever done at that time, 50% more. So taking all that we learned in the last fiscal year and applying it to this fiscal year, we were able to surpass even that achievement. So we're really excited about this. We're going to continue to learn and innovate. We're going to continue applying the things that we've learned. It was an incredible effort by many people across this agency. I can't tell you how hard our workforce was working on this.
So just to recap, here the USCIS director was explaining how after COVID, the consulates in many countries were either not open or not fully opened. So there was a big delay in family-based green cards. So a lot of those visa numbers that the US government allocates every year for that particular green card type, they were not being used because they just couldn't process all those consular processing green cards. So then the they took the decision, the Department of State decided to give those visa numbers to the USCIS, so at least those visa numbers could be used as adjustment of status. So remember, there's always two types of green card applications. When you apply from abroad, that's consular processing, and then you have applications from the US. Those are adjustment of status from a visa into a green card. So they took those visa numbers, and instead of letting them just disappear and not being used, they transfer them to USCIS, and that's how there was a 2x increase in the typical number of processes completed for adjustment of status in the recent times. And that's really great news. And it's good to see how USCIS is finding solutions to increase the efficiency of the overall process. Even though some people were being affected by those delays, at least there was something good out of that, and those visa numbers were not wasted and were used for more adjustment of status than usual. The next clip is about something very important, how USCIS is planning to reduce the backlog problem, how they will increase the processing time speeds, so you, the prospective green card applicant, will have in the next year a shorter processing time. It's something that we all look forward to seeing.
The generic backlogs, the backlogs that the agencies experience in virtually all form types. Right. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your progress in attacking, I call it attacking the backlog and dealing with the backlogs and those pain points, and also how you go about measuring your success in that regard.
Yeah, this is something that pretty much consumes a big portion of my day-to-day work at USCIS. Most importantly to this is we've introduced some cycle time goals. And we are hoping for most of our major forms, 6 months and some under than that time frame by the end of the coming fiscal year. And I have to say that we're on our way. So we are already showing progress. Let me just talk about this. The N400, the application for naturalization. In December of 2021, the cycle time was 13 months. And as of July of this year, 9.6 months. So we think we're going to hit that goal. So that's just an example. And we're seeing that little by little in other forms throughout. We need the time to get through it. It is a big, big number. 8.5 million pending, over 5 million that are beyond those 6 month, those cycle time goals. So we have a lot of work. But I also want to note, how are we getting there? It's not just setting a goal for the agency, but I will say that setting goals is always the first place you go for anything you want to do. When you're ready, you have to set an ambitious but achievable goal. And we think we can get there. Some of the other things that we're doing, of course, hiring. I talked a little bit about the fact that we had a hiring freeze due to our financial crisis. Right. And that was a freeze for about a year. So if you can imagine being unable in the middle of COVID to replace all those individuals who were leaving the agency for multiple reasons, retirements, whatever it was. So we hit almost 80% fill rate. So almost 1 in 5 jobs was not filled. The good news is, since we set these goals earlier this year, we have now hit very close to, we might have hit it in fact this week, 85%. So that's quite a bit in just a few months. And I'm happy to report there are a lot of people in the pipeline. As you know, the federal hiring process is not known for speed, but we have an incredible workforce at our human capital and training. They are working so hard, so hard. I worry about them. It's a lot of pressure. But they have so many people they've already gotten through, and there are many people on their way. So that's another thing. We're also taking a look at our policies. There are many policies. This backlog is, while it's unprecedented at the number, but this backlog has existed in the past, pre-COVID. And many times, some policy decisions are made without considering efficiency. So we are considering how is it that we can ensure a process that doesn't that isn't slowing things down. If it's not based in the law, not based in sound policy or security or integrity, why are we doing it? Let's figure this out. We're also, as you know, more electronic filing and processing. That is an incredible efficiency. So to the extent that we can make better use of that, and we are doing more and more of that day by day. And I'm going to repeat it again, and it doesn't seem as connected, but having a strong financial footing. That is so important for the people who work here to feel that tomorrow their job will be here and feel motivated to continue in their job and feel secure. But it's also for the future to know that we will have the money that we need in order to have the resources to process. So the good news is Congress has entrusted us with some funding, which is not very common in appropriations, and I am very grateful for those who have helped us and supported us with the Congress to appropriate money. And we are also looking at a new potential fee rule for the future to ensure that we are living up to inflation, to ensure that we are living up to the needs of the agency and the things that are coming into us.
Yeah, and we were very pleased to contribute to that effort this year by doing what we call a formal recommendation on your fee-for-service dilemmas.
Yes.
And the fact that the agency has a very prolonged and difficult process for establishing fees. The last time the agency was able to do that successfully was about 6 years ago, and of course, those fees are somewhat outdated, and we very much endorse the notion of the agency being able to get appropriated funds on a more regular basis.
So these are just my notes about this clip and how the USCIS director explained. They want a cycle time goal of maximum 6 months for each of the forms. So that applies for I-140, for example, for our EB2 NIW, and even adjustment of status. So by the end of the current fiscal year, which is September 2023, they want to hit that 6 months mark, and she was in this video very optimistic about hitting that goal. We'll see in the next slide the full chart explaining those times from the USCIS website. So the way they plan to achieve this goal is, number one, hiring. The hiring freeze was lifted after 1 year of hiring freeze that really affected the USCIS speed. And now they have covered about 85% of the jobs that had been lost during that period. So that's great news. They also plan to increase efficiency with more electronic filing and processing, and then increase or improve the financial situation of USCIS. And that will mean more security for employees, so they can have better retention of the employees at USCIS, and they don't lose them, and keep them motivated about their job. And then they want to have more resources for processes. And one good positive thing that we heard here is that Congress provided some funding, and that's not really common for USCIS because USCIS is 97% fee funded. So your fees fund most of the operations, and unfortunately there's some humanitarian measures that USCIS has to take over that is not really typically not covered by anything else, so they have to take resources from the fees that you pay for your forms. Let's take a look at the cycle time goals that were released in March this year. You can access this official information in the USCIS website. I leave a link here and in the description below, and you can see how they have different goals. The very important ones for us is that both the adjustment of status I-485 form and also the famous I-140 the form, the non-premium processing form, they want to hit a 6 months cycle time. So that means that if you submit any of these forms in a maximum time of 6 months, your decision should be communicated to you. And that's something that has not happened in the recent times. The wait times have been way longer than 6 months. So this will be excellent news, together with something that we already covered in this channel, which is how USCIS is increasing premium processing to categories of green cards that didn't have it, for example, EB2 NIW. And that's ongoing, it's happening, and you can check out the video that I leave here in the corner above, where I talk on where we are in that. And finally, let's take a look at the fees. We are going to see a clip where they talk about fees at USCIS and how they may very well increase in the near future.
And one of the other aspects of it is the way we determine the costs that we have. We go through a biannual fee study, which of course has to account for a moment in time, and it happens every 2 years. And that by the time we finish the biannual fee study and by the time we publish a notice for proposed rulemaking with a new fee structure, and by the time we finalize that, we're already into the next fee study. So it's almost somewhat outdated, but we need to rely on a study because it needs to go through the Administrative Procedures Act. So it is a difficult process, and people also may not know. I did not know this, and wasn't clear to me until I really walked in, is that, of course, we can't forget, we have pay increases that our fees need to cover, and our fee studies cover it for 2 years. But there's another pay increase. I mean, everybody's pay continues to go up. We also have inflation, contracts go up, needs go up. If we want to move into a more technological environment, we need to pay for that. So the costs do increase. And as you stated, it's now been 6 years since we raised our fees. Right. And we're now at a moment where we're clearly seeing the need, at the same time, a growing humanitarian interest and things that we need to participate in that need to be covered.
Yeah, and we point that out too. And really, our theme is that the agency needs stable and sustainable funding in order to complete its mission.
Absolutely.
So good luck.
Thank you.
In those, and we'll join you in those overtures to
all the support
making
you
that
can provide.
happen. Yeah. Well,
so in this video, you saw how they talk about the way USCIS set the costs. They do a biannual study. And I said earlier that the last fee raise was 6 years ago, and they mentioned this several times in their conversation. There is a lot of costs that increase every year: salaries, inflation of contracts, and the costs of modernizing the process. They talk about how they want to make the process more electronic, more modern, faster, so they can reduce those wait times, and that is going to cost money. And finally, humanitarian efforts by USCIS are typically not funded by fees. So all of this means, the way I see it from what I hear from them, is that I wouldn't be surprised that very soon they will announce that there will be an increase in fees that are paid. For example, for an I-140 form, we currently pay $700. I would say it is very likely that in the coming months, that amount of $700 goes up. But we will have to see how much they will increase those fees. Hopefully it will not be a lot, and it will mean that they are able to work towards that plan of reducing the processing times, and at least that money that you will pay extra will serve a purpose. Overall, I think this video showed very positive news, news of reducing times of all the processes. And if you are thinking about applying for a green card or any kind of immigration procedure, I think now is the time to start working on it so you can benefit from this already reducing times for the processing times, and you can do it before they raise all those fees that we talked about. If you want to learn more about EB2 NIW and how you can self-petition, you don't need a lawyer, you don't need a job offer, a work authorization, you can check my website, eb2niw.info, where you can download my real, successful, and actionable petition. So you can check out my I-140 petition. It's a 200-page document, and you can use it to write your own and submit your own case. In addition, I had started providing a new support service where I do coaching for people that want to do a do-it-yourself green card application. This service is available now. You can apply to it, and we'll have an email exchange talking about it and see if you fit the profile that I'm looking for. And it includes 2 calls or video calls, so we can talk about the strategy of your petition. We can talk about different tips that I can give you, how to plan the writing, how can you be more effective in your I-140, and I will review your petition package. So it does not include writing. I will not write on your behalf. You will be the one doing the writing. I will guide you and give you my best tips that I have from my own experience. And then I will also not give you any opinion on your qualifications or any prediction on your percentage chance of success. I never do that. I get a lot of emails and a lot of comments on YouTube. I never provide that kind of prediction. I don't think it would be fair to anyone, because only you know your profile better than anyone, and only the USCIS officer that will judge your case will decide if you are approved or not. What we can do is we can work together to make your case as strong as possible and submit the best petition that we can. So check out my website, and I'll see you in the next video.
But there is a ways to go. We need to continue to ensure our fiscal solvency. We need to continue hiring, improving our employee morale. We need to get at those efficiency measures. We need to stand for our humanitarian ideals and continue pushing on those humanitarian ideals. And ultimately also doing more of this, having more public engagement, having stronger customer service, so that we can be in better touch with the people that are going through the system, and we can make better policies and processes that work for all.